And welcome, and thank you for joining us today for GED Day as we offer training in various key subjects such as math, writing, science, and social studies. I am Amy Ferrari. I am the Adult Training and Development Network, also known as ATDN Director, and I will be your moderator for today. All of our sessions are being recorded. Materials will be shared by the presenters, and we will make as much as we can available to you after GED Day ends, and all that will be sent by email to you as well. Certainly feel free to put any questions or comments that you have throughout, either in the chat or unmute yourself as we continue through this session. So we are starting the third session for GED today, GED Day today. My goodness, that's a tongue twister this Friday. The session title is, Will This Be on the Test? Our presenter has worked in the field of adult numeracy for over 10 years, both as a classroom teacher and providing professional development for math and numeracy teachers. They are consultant for SABES, which is the System of Adult Basic Education Support, which is the PD system in Massachusetts. And that's the Mathematics and Adult Numeracy Curriculum and Instruction PD Center at Turk. And again, that's all based in Massachusetts. They develop and facilitate training and workshops and coach numeracy teachers, and is a treasurer for the Adult Numeracy Network, also known as ANN or ANN. I'd like to introduce you today to Erin Liu and thank them for presenting for us today. Go right ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Amy. So my name is Erin Liu, and I'm really happy to be here with you today. And so I'm going to go back actually in the slideshow to the student work that some of you had a chance to look at already, and some of you haven't seen yet. But I'd like us to take a few minutes to look at this, and I would really like to hear, what's on your mind when you look at this. What thoughts does this bring up for you? I see a short comment in the chat that says, "Oh no." I wonder if there's any elaboration, if you could elaborate on that. Does it make sense? Okay. So are you asking if the student chose an answer that makes sense? The student knows the keywords to look for, but a timeline might have helped to make sense of the problem. Okay, so identifying that the student did use a keyword strategy and also maybe didn't make sense. This demonstrates that the student thinks difference always means subtraction. So something to consider is, why would a student think that, and what's the impact of thinking that? It's too bad the student did the opposite operation, but recognizes words. Keywords isn't necessarily the best strategy. The student is using a keyword, but that's the danger of teaching keywords. So we're definitely seeing that when we just teach students that when you see the word difference, that means subtract, this can be something that results from it. I wonder, do we see anything in this student work that you think is positive? They check their answer, checking their work. Yeah, they can add and subtract. The computations were correct. Annotated notes, reframed in their own words, wrote out their thoughts, explained their reasoning. Yeah, like there's a lot here that the student did really well. Like, I want to give this student a lot of credit because they clearly worked hard. They did what they were supposed to do, or what they thought they were supposed to do. They restated the question. They explained their reasoning, underlined keywords. Yeah, I mean, this is somebody who was really working hard, who cared about getting this right, and yet we also see that they chose an answer that didn't make sense, right? If we read this story, there's a 35-year age difference between Paulina and her son. If Paulina's son is 8, how old is Paulina? It doesn't make sense that she could be 27. Maybe it's an ESL student. Yeah. So maybe there is some language difficulty there. And it is possible that the student reads that maybe Paulina is 35 and her son is 8, but the question is still asking how old is Paulina. So I'm gonna I think I'm gonna give this student the benefit of the doubt and say that making sense was not on their agenda, because I believe that the student could have made sense of this. And it's not that they didn't care about making sense. It's that they didn't try to make sense. And I want us to think about, why would a student not try to make sense of a task? And my feeling is because they knew what they were supposed to do, and making sense wasn't part of that, right? Building their own understanding, applying their own strategy, or using their brain wasn't part of what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to read the question, restate it, underline keywords, do their calculation, check their calculation, state their answer, and explain their work, right? And they did all of that, and making sense was not on that list. So, and we see that when you don't make sense, then you can pick answers that are unreasonable and incorrect. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at an instructional routine for standardized test preparation. You can use this for the GED or other standardized tests. And it's called, the routine is called Test Talk. The session is called Will This Be on the Test? And the idea here is that this is something that we can do that is going to bring GED prep into our math classes in a way that furthers our students' learning, furthers their mathematical identity, their inclination to make sense, and prepares them for the test at the same time. So this is much broader than spending our class time going over practice problems or giving out practice tests and then reviewing them, or teaching students how to approach particular types of test questions. So our objectives for the session today, we're going to look at reasoning visually and conceptually about test questions. So in a test-taking context, we're going to look at how this is using test questions to teach conceptually and equitably. I hope that by the end you will leave with an idea of how to facilitate the test talk routine. You'll get to see the whole thing in its entirety once here, and then you'll also have access to a packet that has all the details of how to facilitate it. And those details are sort of a formalization of how I've done it with my students, but I encourage you to see them as guidelines and to adapt this as makes sense for your students. And finally, to become familiar with the material. So you will leave with access to a packet that is going to have actually pretty much all the content that I'm going to share today and a lot more. So if you're concerned about taking notes on content, I wouldn't worry too much about that, because it's all in the packet, and the packet is online and you'll have access to that. So, so basically our agenda is we're going to come back and talk some more about this question we were just looking at, Paulina and her son. Then I'm going to take you formally through the test talk routine, and I'm going to kind of let you in on the teacher side at the same time. So you're going to experience it and learn as learners, but also I'm going to be transparent about what I'm doing as the teacher. And then I'm also going to talk about how all of this connects to equity in our classrooms. So let's come back to Paulina, and I've been talking about making sense, and I just want to be really clear about how this could have been different if the student had, if their first step had been to make sense of the story, of the question. Because this is a context that is pretty accessible. This doesn't require a lot of outside knowledge to make sense of this story. Although it does require a little bit of knowledge that I think is reasonable to assume, and I'll share it with you now. So the student might start by thinking, There's a 35-year age difference between Paulina and her son. And this is important, Paulina is older than her son. This is how parent-child relationships work, and this is something that I think is pretty common knowledge. But putting those two things together, taking the minute to think about that, the student might then rephrase what's going on here. Paulina is 35 years older than her son, which feels like more accessible language. That word difference is confusing, right? The idea that difference means subtraction is already kind of confusing, even if you just take your teacher's word for it. But now we have an idea. Paulina is 35 years older than her son, and this is multiple choice. And there's no way that somebody who's 27 years old can be 35 years older than another person, right? In fact, if we look again at the answer choices, just with this idea that Paulina is 35 years older than her son, there are only two answer choices that are even possible. And then if we consider that her son is already 8 years old, there's only one that makes sense, right? So in fact, this is a case where the student didn't even need to do computation. So I think now, like, we know what the answer to the question is, and probably a lot of you figured it out already, but I want to take a look at some other strategies. So another strategy that's really powerful with this question and with lots of test questions is to draw a picture. And I'm going to give you now a minute. I'm going to invite you to draw a picture. And I will provide an opportunity to share if anybody feels brave and wants to share their picture, or if you want to describe your picture in the chat. But I'm going to stop talking for a minute, let you draw a picture, and then I'd love to hear something about what you drew. I see somebody's just arriving in the chat. No, I wasn't speaking. I was just being quiet to give folks a chance to try to draw a picture to illustrate this. Thanks for checking. So I wonder, is there anybody who is willing to hold your picture up to your camera? If so, I'll spotlight your video. Okay, let me see. I'm going to stop my share, and I see a picture coming up. So let me see if I can spotlight this. Okay, nice. So I see a sort of a number line with some hops on it that look like they're adding 5 hops, starting from 8 and continuing to add 5 until we got to 43, and I see 7 hops. Okay, thanks so much for sharing that, Molly. Anybody else willing to show a picture or to describe in the chat or out loud what you drew? All right, no pressure. I'm going to share my screen again. Oh, is there a picture coming up? Faye, excellent. Let me see if I can spotlight your picture here. Okay, nice. A really different picture. We see a sort of an older person who looks like maybe Paulina, and a older, I'd say bigger person and a smaller person. And then this line in between them that says 35 years, question mark, showing what's unknown, and the smaller person labeled with 8 years. Thanks. That's a really clear showing of the information in the question. And Jessica says, I did a similar number line, but basic, starting with 8 and a line plus 35. Okay, so different ways. Oh, I see another picture coming up here. Let me spotlight that one. Another one with 2 people in it, and a sort of a plus 35, and then showing a subtraction underneath. So maybe seeing the relationship as an addition relationship, but using subtraction to solve for the unknown. Excellent, thank you. Fantastic. I hope that you folks are inspired by the variety just that we've seen with a few people sharing their pictures. And I will say, I love the stick figures. I see lots of people draw stick figures, and in terms of traditional math problem diagrams, we expect to see things like number lines, right? And I have a number line too. I mean, number lines are great, right? They're super helpful for visualizing relationships. And the stick figures are interesting because um, I've seen people draw like stick figures with a 35 showing the difference between the sun's height and Paulina's height. And we measure difference of heights in inches, usually not in years, but it's still, even though that's not the way age works, it helps us see the relationships of the numbers, and it can help a student figure out how to do. And I think our student whose work we were looking at would not have subtracted 8 from 35 if they had drawn that picture that even with the stick figures. So there isn't a right way to draw a picture to illustrate this. But anytime we draw a picture to visualize what's going on, it clarifies the relationships. It clarifies, a lot of folks say that it's the language. The language is confusing, right? And that's why students struggle with these tasks. And it's true, though it is hard to make sense of the language, but drawing a picture is a deliberate and explicit way of making sense of the language. So so we saw a couple number lines, a few people talked about number lines. This is the way I drew the number line, which I think was in the chat as well. Oops, I lost the chat. Oh, a bar chart. Okay, thanks for sharing that, Amina. But I think this probably looks like Jessica's number line. Starts with 8 and then just adding 35 for the 35-year age difference, and that gets us to Paulina's age. And then it becomes clear, even though I didn't say plus 35, I can see, because I'm using that information that Paulina is older than her son, I can see that it's further up, further to the right on the number line. So that would make sense that it would be 35 more than 8 and not, say, 35 less than 8. But also, and I'm not sure, Amina, if this is maybe this is something like what you drew. And feel free to speak up or put it in the chat if you want to clarify for us. But because I call this a bar model or a tape diagram, and it's a favorite visualization of mine. I find it really useful for making sense of word problems. Because I see Robert is sharing. Hang on, let me see if I can spotlight that. It's a little blurry, Robert. There we go. Okay. I see it. Okay. So it's also a number line quite similar to the one I was just showing. Yeah. And it's a kind of an open number line in the sense that we don't have every single tick mark drawn in, and the tick marks, may or may not be helpful to students. Students who need them will draw them, and students who don't need them won't. And I see. So this says minus 35. So you're showing the action of subtraction on the number line with the unknown at the sort of at the right end where Paulina's age is. Yeah, so that's different. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. Let me go back to my share. So what I was saying about the bar model is that I'll show you one more piece of information that I can fill in on this bar model. And it's not that different really from the number lines. It's kind of like a thick number line, but I like it because I feel like it helps me visualize all the information that's in the story. And then once I see it all, I can think, well, how will I figure out what Paulina's age is? And it seems intuitive and clear. And it's not so it's not to say bar models are better than number lines. It's just great to have multiple tools. And if you're new to bar models or you're not super comfortable with them, there are some links in the packet to places where you can learn more about bar models, and you'll see them as strategies in a lot of the questions that are in the packet. So I just think they're two, like, one thing that to say that's sort of different about the number line and the bar model is that with the number line, it feels to me like there's an action happening here, like the 35-year age difference is telling me to do something, and that's an action. And with the bar model, it feels like it's more like a description of a condition. And again, neither of those is better. It's just two different ways of thinking about it. So however it sits with you would inform how you might choose to draw the picture. And I'll share another strategy. I mean, you might be thinking at this point, like, how many strategies could there be for this really, small problem? So I see. I'm going to share a link to the packet at the end, and it's online, and Amy will also have that link if you lose it. But I'm going to share that at the end, so you haven't missed it. So here's one more strategy, which is uh, also a making sense strategy, and it's a strategy of making an analogy. So, as I said before, this is a context that's really familiar to pretty much everybody. A lot of our students have children, a lot of our students are parents, but if you are not a parent, then you probably know somebody who is, or you might have siblings who have children or friends who have children. At any rate, you have some idea of how it works, the age difference between adults and children. So a student might think, and I mean, this is just an internet picture, but an imaginary student, but the student might think, well, I'm 28 years old and my daughter is 5, and the difference in our ages is 23 years. And this is a situation now where I have all of the information, there's nothing missing. And so I could ask myself then, if I didn't know my own age, which is kind of absurd, but that's the kinds of things that come up in these standardized test questions, how would I find it if I knew my daughter's age and I knew the age difference? And whatever makes sense to do there, where I know what the answer is, I can apply that same strategy to the numbers in the question. And also, when you can connect something to your life personally, it just makes it, I think, overall less scary. Like, it feels like, okay, this is just real world thinking, which our students are capable of, and which they often check at the door when they come into math class, because they think there's a certain way you're supposed to think in math class, and the strategies they use in the real world don't belong here. And so one of the things that I want to do with this routine is help students bring their real world good thinking brains into math class with them, so that they're not just listening and thinking, I'm supposed to do what the teacher tells me. They think, I have tools myself for figuring things out, which is true of our adult students. So, thinking now about, you've seen several strategies. What did you like that you saw? So Denise liked the analogy. Jessica likes number lines and tape diagrams. Teresa also liked the idea of making an analogy, drawing a picture. So one of the things I want you to be aware of here is that none of these strategies is the best strategy. which one that you liked. Yeah, it depends on the student. Some students benefit from drawing pictures, others respond better to personalized problems. Yeah, and students can be empowered to personalize the problem. Students can be empowered to draw pictures so that even if a picture isn't provided, or even if the problem doesn't feel personal, they can create that. There's more than one way to figure it out. So I wonder, I'm going to drop two questions in, and I wonder, first of all, did seeing these inspire a new way of thinking about the question for you? And also, how does exploring multiple approaches foster student agency? And I think there's some ideas about that already trickling in. Uh, Becky says, I taught elementary school and like using the part to whole relationship. Yeah, thinking about parts and wholes in is relevant to lots of context. Depends on the student. Uh, some students might think anything else is other than doing it in their head is too much work. And that's an interesting point, Andrew. Thank you, because uh, I don't think we should be forcing students to use strategies that don't feel effective to them, right? I want to provide students with strategies. I want to, I especially want to help students see that they are capable of creating strategies. But if something happens in their head quickly and they get the answer, then, and they feel confident about it, or if they see a picture in their head, then yeah, nobody should be forcing them to draw a picture, right? But if they're stuck, or if they can't make sense, they can't get started, then drawing a picture is a really great strategy to help get into it. Um, I love drawing pictures to solve problems as well. Yeah. Uh, so I just want to sort of sit on this idea of why it's valuable to have seen all these different approaches. I try to show how to draw to solve problems. I don't see them using them a lot on their own, but I could prompt them more to get them to try if they're stuck. Bar models lead well into algebra. That's true. Yeah, there's lots of algebraic thinking in using bar models. So, so if you're new to bar models, that's also something to explore. Uh, yeah. Okay. So what Teresa said is sort of, this is at the heart of it. It's making me think of some of my students who are used to just doing what they think they're supposed to do and don't feel empowered to recognize they have their own ideas. So when we teach students that there isn't a single right way to solve a problem, which is really different from, what you'll find, for example, in the GED books, right? If you look in the GED books, it will say, here's a problem, and here are the steps to solve it. It doesn't even say here's a way to solve it. It tells you these are the steps this is what you were supposed to do. And it's very disempowering. Whereas having access to these, it's not a case of students have to learn and be familiar with and be good at and make sense of all of these strategies. That is not what students need. They need to connect with things that make sense to them so that they discover what resonates with them and they start to generate their own strategies. So you don't walk away from this task with students feeling like I have to remember how to do the number line, I have to remember how to do the bar model, how to make the analogy, how to just make sense of it. That's not the point of it. The point is for a student to leave going, wow, that bar model really helped it make sense, and not even worry about the other stuff. Or I never thought about comparing this to my own life. I'm going to remember that for the future. So so if a student ever says to you, why do I have to learn all these strategies? That's so confusing. They don't have to learn them. And you can say that. You can say, focus on something that makes sense to you. But the other things that are happening here, the other strategies that you're seeing, it's worth listening to them because they make sense to other people. And you might learn something, you might find something that makes sense to you. But certainly they don't have to memorize them. They don't have to beat their heads against them if they don't make sense. They just have to find something that does make sense. So, so now it was like a very informal test talk. And now we're going to do it a lot more formally, and I'm going to kind of let you in on all of the steps that I'm thinking about as I'm going through it. So the first thing that you're, and again, all of this is in the packet, so you don't need to worry about writing any of this down unless it's helpful to you. The first step is to select a question. So the packet contains a lot of questions, and also I write a blog. So every month there's a new question with a list of strategies as well. So you have a pretty big bank of questions available, and you don't have to use any of those. You can also use a question that you pull from a test prep book or a question that you've made up yourself. The possibilities are many. So, but I'm going to tell you something about how to select a question, and there's some more guidance about this in the packet as well. But here's 2 points that I want to share that are really important. The first one is that you want to choose a question that you have not explicitly taught your students how to do. Okay? So it's fine if you've been working on the area of triangles and then you want to give your students some practice questions that involve finding the area of triangles in a test-like context, but that's not what this routine is about. This routine is about hitting students with something that they don't know how to do, or that you have not taught them how to do, that they don't have a memorized procedure for. And one of the reasons for that is because that is definitely going to happen to them on the test. Right? You can't possibly teach them how to do all of the questions that they're going to see. There isn't time, and you don't know what the questions are. Okay? So they're going to see questions that look brand new. And some of those questions are questions that they can figure out, that they have tools to figure out, even if they don't have the tools that the test question writer was targeting. For example, the question about Paulina and her son, and this student was not my student. I don't have like the worksheet that this came from, but I could see it being a case where there were instructions that said, write and solve an algebraic equation to answer the question, and that the person who wrote it was intending for you to write the equation, x minus 35 equals 8, and then solve the equation using algebraic operations. And that is a way to solve it. I don't think any of us did it that way, but that is a way to solve it. But the great thing about multiple choice questions or standardized questions is they can't make you solve it a particular way. So even if students don't have the particular skill that the question is targeting, they may still have fundamental understandings that are necessary to find a path to the solution, not the path necessarily that might be in the book, but a path to the solution. And when I started putting together this resource, when I started writing this blog, one of my main motivations was to help teachers see all these different paths that there are to solution. Because for us, especially if you look at a question and you go, I know what to do, I know how I'm supposed to do that, it can be quite difficult to think flexibly and creatively and find visual and conceptual approaches. It feels easier to just say to your students, well, this is what you do. First this, then this, then this. But that might not be an approach that makes sense to students. And if they haven't had a chance to find it themselves, then it's not really going to stick. This is what the teacher said, and I wrote it down. So, so what we're doing here with these two conditions, students don't know how to do the problem, but they do have some understandings, is we're creating the conditions for productive struggle. We're creating the conditions where students can think flexibly and creatively and arrive at a solution. And that's going to make a difference to them on the test, because there are going to be kind of 3 kinds of questions on the test. They're going to be ones that they know how to do, and they'll just do them. They don't need to be flexible and creative if they look at it and they go, I remember how to do this, and then just do it. And then there's going to be questions that are like totally beyond their reach, and they look like they're written in Greek and making sense is not an option. But then there's going to be a whole bunch of questions in the middle. And these middle questions are going to be what's going to make the difference between passing and failing the test, because these are the places where students have a chance to really stretch and to get correct answers that maybe they might have thought were beyond their reach. So, okay. So, and there's some other, as I said, some other ideas about this in the packet as well, but I just wanted to make those 2 points. I've chosen a question, there are 34 of us here. I don't know any of you, so I've chosen a question that I hope will give you a chance for productive struggle, but I'd be a lot more sort of thoughtful about it if you were my students and I knew something about what you'd been working on and what your understandings were. So, so the next step is to set expectations. This is a routine. It's important for students to know what to expect. I think setting expectations is important, and I would do it every time, but it can get briefer as students get more familiar with the routine. So, so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you a question that I think is challenging, that I hope will challenge you. I'm going to give you time to think about it and come up with a strategy. And then we're going to have time together to talk about what you thought about in your think time. Today, you may not have enough time to come completely to a solution, but you will have time to think, and I hope that you'll have something to share when we come together. I will say that as teachers, you may look at this and say, oh yeah, I know what to do. I have the procedural knowledge to get the answer quickly. I'm going to challenge you to imagine yourself in the position of your students. Maybe try not to use your memorized procedure. Think about the tools that your students have, and what can you come up with if you didn't know how to do it. Also, I'm going to ask you, if you feel stuck, if you feel like your struggle is unproductive, then please do send me a private message in the chat. I want to be able to connect with you. And so I'll just sort of recap quickly for what students should know going into this. Students should know that they're going to have time to think. This is not a test situation. This is not a timed situation. Today, we're not going to have as much time as I would give students in class, but they should feel relaxed and like there's time to think. The question may look unfamiliar or intimidating, but you believe that they have the skills to make sense of it. They should know that they're going to be asked to share their reasoning. And also that they shouldn't look at a question and think, I can't remember what I'm supposed to do, or try to remember what they're supposed to do. This is a figuring out situation. So all they need to bring to it is their good thinking brain. And I do see your comment in the chat, Andrew. This is where I usually tell students that they start out feeling confused, but between their background knowledge and what the test reveals about itself and the question, stem, and answer choices, they should be able to have the 85% to get the 15% under control. It is hopeful thinking, but yeah, but it makes a difference. It absolutely makes a difference. So confidence is part of this, but it's the confidence of going in knowing that they are thinkers, not the confidence of going in knowing that they've seen all the question types before, because you can be really confident and get it wrong, right? Like I think our student that we looked at the beginning proceeded very confidently through it. So, but I do hope that this will help students approach the test more confidently. Okay. I want to make sure you have some time to think. So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to assign the question, or I'm going to share a question with you. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to think. Okay? So take a deep breath. This is going to be a test question, but this is not a test situation. I really want you to think during this time, and I hope that you'll share your thinking afterwards, even if you didn't get to an answer, even if you got to an answer and you're not sure if it's right, or even if you got to an answer and you're sure it's wrong, you'll still have something important to contribute. So here it is. If you've come to an answer, you don't need to share it right now. And we're still going to take another minute or two, so you can try to think of another strategy if you have time. Yeah, I'm going to bring us back together, and I apologize if I'm interrupting good deep thinking from anybody. But I do want to, our time is limited today, and I want to have a chance to hear from you. So the next piece of the routine is to facilitate strategy sharing, and I'm not going to say a lot about it right now. I'm just going to go right into it. So at this point, I want to hear about your strategies. So if somebody is willing to unmute and talk, or if you want to put your ideas in the chat, I'd like to hear about how you used your thinking time. So not just successful strategies, but also we can really benefit from hearing about struggles as well, or things that you tried that didn't work. Oh, Molly, okay, hang on. Let me stop my share and I will pin your video so we can see what you're sharing here. Okay, so it looks like you did some computations. Tell me if I'm correct that you found the area of each piece and then you used division to find the percent. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, sorry.
Thanks. Okay. Let me come back to my screen share. And I see also in the chat, oops, I lost the chat. Get it back. Okay. Assuming, so this is Andrew, assuming I didn't know much more than the area formula, so maybe I don't have a lot of familiarity with percentages, I think I would put or artificially move the inset blue square so it's inlaid in one of the corners. Then visually I can say, yeah, it's not 75%, so E is out, and it's also not 12%, so A is out. And then I could say 60 squared is 3,600. 80 by 150 is 12,000. So it's over a quarter by a little bit. Okay, and you couldn't see the answer choices anymore. Nice, but okay, so I want to kind of see if I can illustrate a little bit what Andrew was sharing. So, okay, so this is what Andrew, this is my interpretation of what Andrew was writing in the chat, was that Andrew moved the playground sort of over into the corner of the park like that. You didn't say which corner, so I just kind of guessed that. But even from that, Andrew was able to kind of estimate what percentage it was, that it looked like maybe a little bit over a quarter. And that's going to help with thinking about what the answer choices might be. And I guess because you, Andrew, you thought about the numbers, so you wrote that, let's see, 3,600 square feet over 12,000 square feet, or out of 12,000 feet, felt like more than a quarter, or more than 25%. Jessica said, rephrase the question, created a plan ending with a proportion. Okay, I'd love to hear more if you want to share more about that. Find the area of the rectangle, find the area of the square, create the ratio, and divide to find the percentage. Uh, so, okay, Mary had two strategies actually here, and I know we saw um, that using the ratio to find a percentage, but also Mary suggested finding the ratios of the sides, which would be 3/4 and 2/5, and multiplying those together. So this is a place where I would definitely want to hear more from Mary, because I imagine a lot of people are not clear where these ratios came from. So that would be worth sharing. Uh, Andrew does look a little like a flag. Um, okay. Uh,
Did you want me to? I
oh,
was
go ahead,
thinking
Mary. Thanks.
I
Yeah.
was thinking about what Andrew did and just trying to estimate it, but it was kind of close to 36 too. So I thought I might make a mistake from that. But if I was just going to compare the sides, which is really the same thing as like comparing the ratio. So I took 60 over 80 is 3/4. And then 60 over 150 is 3/10. I think I simplified them, but the students could do all that on the computer, on a calculator. I don't think they would do that, but I was just trying to find an alternative way to do it because I had thought about kind of what he was doing, and I thought I could probably get something more accurate by doing it that way, by doing the ratios of the sides rather
Yeah.
than the ratios of the whole area. It's kind of the same thing.
And it works. So
Hmm.
so thank you for clarifying that, where those numbers came from. I do see somebody shared in the chat using a sort of an estimation strategy that allowed them to eliminate answer choices A and E. Answer choice A was 12%, and answer choice E was 75%. And just from looking at it, you can see that that playground is clearly not as big as 75% of the park, but it is bigger than 12% of the park. And those numbers, by the way, the 75% and the 12% are numbers that you could get from doing something with the numbers in the question. In fact, we see in Mary's strategy the 3/4, right? The 60 over 80 was 3/4. And a student who, just has a sort of jumbled memory of what you're supposed to do with percents might think, well, I know I'm supposed to divide some numbers and then move the decimal point, and they could easily get an answer of 75% by doing that. So, and I want to say too, about the estimation strategy, that being able to eliminate two answer choices just by thinking about what's reasonable is to your student's advantage on the test. The other three were kind of closer together. Um, it's hard to just look at this and guess, is it 30, 36, or 40%? But knowing that it's not 12 or 75 gives your students a better chance. There's no penalty for guessing, and that also is going to make a difference on their test scores. So I'm just skimming through a couple. I see kudos for the ratio strategy. I see using the percent proportion, or using the rules of proportion. There are a lot of things, and what I want to say about these strategies that you probably already had in your head is that they absolutely do work, and they are not the best way to solve the question. And I know they're not the best way because there is no best way. So they are a good way, they are an efficient way, but if they don't make sense to your students, they're not going to be their way. So that's why it's important to be open. Let's include those strategies in the conversation, but they're not going to be, they're not the only way, even though those are probably the strategies that we see in the book. Lisa says, I tried to see how many playgrounds could fit inside the box. Two could fit, leaving enough to paste together to make another, so three altogether. So let me see if I can kind of illustrate that a little bit. In the classroom, the best thing I think would be to have students come up and illustrate their strategies themselves. But you know, if you can, you can try to draw out or illustrate student strategies. And it's important to record their names as well, because I want everybody to have ownership of their strategy. And so Lisa also kind of did a sort of a moving around of putting the playground, you know, maybe there's two, and then maybe I could fit parts of another one inside, you know, maybe by splitting it up or something. It's not the greatest drawing that I did on the fly there, but I'll make a note here. The question was sort of how many fit, and it felt like about 3 fit. So estimating 1/3 and choosing 30% because it's close to 1/3. Also, I'll say that, so having some understanding of benchmark percents, 50%, 25%, 75%, 100%, maybe knowing that 1/3 is close to 30%. These are things that students can develop long before they are doing calculations with finding precise percents. And because of the way these tests are set up, estimation, familiarity with benchmarks can take us a long way. So that's what I'm talking about when I say, like, what fundamental understandings do students need to find a path to the solution? They do not need to know the percent proportion. Knowing the percent proportion is helpful. And if your student goes into the test thinking, I haven't learned percents yet, then they are going to not even try with this question. But if they go into the test saying, well, I know 50% is half and I know what half looks like, they already can see that that playground is less than half of the area of the park, and they can eliminate the 75% and probably the 12% as well. Right? So that kind of confidence comes from, it's about knowing that their knowledge is good knowledge, and that there's more than one way to do it. So let's see. Okay, I'm going to move on. Thank you so much for sharing your strategies. This is the meat of the routine, and it's really important to hear from the students before I say anything about how to solve this. And in fact, one thing that we didn't do is firmly establish what the correct answer is, but I'm hoping that from all of this discussion and seeing strategies that you feel pretty confident about what the answer is at this point. So I want to circle back a little bit to giving think time, which wasn't very difficult for me here. I just sat quiet, but with your students, what you might find is that they get stuck. They don't know where to start, right? And I want their thinking time to be productive. So there's more than just being quiet. One thing is to give enough time, but another thing is, like, what are you going to do when your students are stuck? What are you going to do when they put their pencil down and they wait for you to come over and show them what to do? Because we can't show them what to do. If you show them what to do, if you give them a hint, if you say, why don't you start by finding the areas? If you say, you know, to find a percent, you need to use a ratio. So what numbers do you need for the ratio? If you do any of that kind of leading help, then we're undermining exactly what we're trying to produce here. We're undermining confidence, we're undermining persistence, flexible thinking, and we're telling students they need us. They need us to show them what to do. And they're not going to grow to be independent problem solvers if we do that. They're not going to grow to be independent problem solvers if they know that we're going to come rescue them when they're stuck. So what can you do instead? How can you still be supportive without rescuing them? And I'm going to share some strategies here, and there's more in the packet. But a few ideas of what you can do. There are things you can say to help students move forward, like you can suggest that they try restating the question in their own words. Don't give them any specifics, but suggest that can be helpful. That's a strategy you can offer every time, right? Until they internalize it. So is considering what's reasonable. Have they thought about what's reasonable in this context? So is drawing a picture. And another thing you can do that's really valuable if a student feels like they're in despair because they don't know how to get the answer, they're still going to have something to share in the discussion. So you can encourage them to use their thinking time to make sense of the question and to identify what's making them feel stuck. Because if they can come to the discussion and say, you know, I knew how to find the areas, but then I couldn't figure out what to do with them, then they have something to add. Or if they say, I know to find percents, I need to divide something, but I couldn't figure out what to divide. Or even, you know, I tried dividing 60 by 80 because 60 was for the playground and 80 was for the park, and it gave me 75%, but that didn't look right. So then I didn't know what to do. All of that stuff is valuable to share. All of that stuff helps us build community. It helps us learn from each other. It helps us think about our own thinking, metacognition. So those are all things that you can do to support students when they're stuck. And I also want to say specifically about this idea of rescuing students, that I want to acknowledge that it's really hard not to rescue students. We are all in this because we care about our students, we love our students, and we don't like to see them suffer. And when they're struggling, it can look like they're suffering. So you might find yourself doing it anyway. You might find yourself rescuing a student even when you know that it's not what you want to do. So I just want to provide you with one more strategy or one more thing you can do if you find yourself in that situation. If you realize that you've just done exactly the thing that you didn't want to do, which is that you can apologize to the student. And that's really powerful. All you have to say is, I'm sorry, I took over the thinking for you. That was really silly, because I know you're capable of reasoning through that. And I'm working on not taking over. And you're going to undo a lot of the damage from the rescue with that apology, because you're going to reinforce for the student that you do understand that they are capable thinkers and that it was your mistake to step in. And you can do that in the moment, or you can do it the next day if you wake up in the middle of the night and realize that you rescued a student. But I think it's really worthwhile, if that happens, to apologize. So the next step is to facilitate strategy sharing, which is what we've done. We've done that together, but I just want to share a couple sort of strategy ideas that are in the packet, ways that students can participate, because I really want this to be a big and rich discussion, and I want to hear every student's voice, which we can't do in a context like this. But every student should have something to say. They can describe their thinking, they can share their drawings, they can talk about their struggles. It's so powerful for students to talk about their struggles. It helps break that isolation of thinking you're the only one who struggled, or you're the only one who couldn't figure it out or didn't understand something. And persevering through struggle is exactly what we are trying to build. So students can talk about where in the problem they felt stuck. They can talk about things they tried that didn't work. And sometimes those things, we can help each other to figure out how they can be modified so that they will work. They can talk about ways of thinking that that led to breakthroughs. So this discussion time is as important as the think time. It's really important. Students then get to hear each other's voices. Another thing that's really valuable about this is it starts to break that idea that teacher knows everything. Students are there to get information from the teacher. Students are like the receptacles of information and not thinkers in their own right. When students see each other coming up with creative and original ideas, that's going to boost their confidence and their willingness to be creative themselves. So, and then there's another piece you can go on to, which I think I don't need to do a lot of today because we already heard so many awesome strategies. But one thing you can do, especially if you have a combination of students who just couldn't get anywhere with it and students who were able to reproduce textbook strategies, is that you can share some additional strategies. And this is where the packet's going to be a really great resource for you, because for every question in the packet and for every question in the blog, and there are at least twice as many in the blog as there are in the packet, there are 3 to 5 visual conceptual strategies that you can share with your students. So you come to class with those in your pocket, you pick the ones that you think are going to be valuable for your students. And after they've had a chance to share their own, if these strategies haven't come up, you can share them with your students. And this is going to be something that you'll probably do more of at the beginning, because with a routine like this, where we're trying to build creative and flexible thinking, students won't have that when they first start out. So they're going to need to see some other possibilities, some other ideas. So you're going to need to see, for example, that estimation is powerful. I mean, in this case, I've taken the measurements out of the diagram because we don't need them to estimate here. You can already see that it's between B, C, and D. Right? You can definitely see that here just from looking at generally how the playground relates to the park. And you know, we talked about positive thinking and confidence before, that came up before. That's such a powerful tool, and it's so quick, right? A student could look at this and say, I can't figure out what to do, but I know it's B, C, or D. I'm going to pick C and I'm going to move on. And maybe they'll get it right and maybe they won't. They haven't spent a lot of time, and they had a better chance of picking a correct answer than they did if they hadn't thought about it at all. And it shows, I hope, the value of benchmark percents, of learning 50% at the same time that you learn 1/2. And the same time you learn 0.5, connecting all of those things together and not thinking of percents as this like separate, really difficult thing that requires a lot of steps. And another strategy, and we saw this one already, but I'll talk through it fairly briefly, is the strategy of redrawing the diagram to move the playground. So which several people did, move the playground into the corner or try to make copies of the playground. And it's I want to be clear a couple things about what is inside you that allows you to do that. Because one thing is that you have to understand fundamentally that if you move the playground, it's not going to change what percentage of the area of the park it is, which is not trivial. And if all you know is steps you're supposed to follow, if all you know about area is its length times width, and you don't understand that it's a measure of how much space is inside a shape, then you're not going to know that you can move it. And another thing is that you have to consider, like, what's inside you is you are empowered to do that, right? Which means that you have a sense that you can interrogate this question. You can interact with it. A lot of students have the idea that math class is about what's allowed and what's not allowed. You're allowed to do this. You're allowed to add 3 as long as you add 3 to the other side of the equation, right? You're allowed to add the same thing to both sides. You're not allowed to change only one side. But it's not about what's allowed and what's not allowed. It's about what makes sense to do. And so when I've presented a strategy like this, where I've redrawn the diagram, and then I've used sort of some understanding of benchmark relationships, like 60 is more than half of 80, to make a reasonable sketch. 60 is less than half of 150. When I've done that, I've sort of broken the question, right? Like, it doesn't look the same as it looked before. So, and if I give all the authority to the test, to the teacher, to the book, then I'm going to think it's not, you can't do this. And so when I've shown this to students, a common response is, you never said we were allowed to do that. Like, that's like an indignant response. You didn't say we were allowed to redraw it. And so I don't want students to be thinking that I have all the authority, that I'm in charge of what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And then once you do this, it helps with the estimation. In fact, by drawing in these little lines to show halves, I kind of can picture what a quarter looks like. And then I might use the strategy that we saw before of breaking up the playground and moving part of it around to see, like, how does it feel like it relates to a quarter. Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for your comment in the chat. So let's see if there's anything else I wanted to say about this. Okay, let's take this to the next step. So that was just the sharing of extra strategies. And if you look up this question in the packet, this question and the question about Paulina are both in the packet, you'll find that there's one or two other strategies for this as well that you might be interested in checking out, ones that we didn't even see today. So the next thing is to wrap up the routine. And so there are 3 more pieces that I'm calling the wrapping up steps. One is to make sure that every student has a strategy that they like. And the way this is going to work is that there's a student handout for every question. It's a very simple handout. So if you decide to use your own questions, you can recreate this yourself. The first thing it has in it is space for students to do their work. So it says, this is my strategy, and there's space. The next thing is my favorite strategy. And so during the sharing of strategies, students can then write down, or after, when they've had a chance to hear all of them, they can write down which one made the most sense to them. And it might be the one that they came up with themselves, or it might be one that they heard from somebody else. But there's a lot of power in having them write that down. It's going to help them internalize it. It's going to help them sort of review the reasoning and really, take in the thing that made the most sense to them. So that's kind of step 8 is for them to have a chance to write down what strategy they liked the best, and also what they liked about it. That's the third prompt on the page. So it's my strategy, my favorite strategy, and why I liked it. And all of these things can be part of a wrap-up discussion where students are going to share which strategy was their favorite strategy. Sharing out loud about which strategy they liked and what they liked about it is going to give them a chance to solidify again their connection to that strategy. And also, this is giving us an opportunity for students to lift each other up and to build community. It's so powerful for students to hear from another student that their strategy made a difference, that they came up with something that was valuable to somebody else. Okay? And again, it starts to change that idea that we've all been so soaked in for so long, that teachers know everything and students are just there to listen to the teachers. And it's so important that students learn that students are capable of original thought, of creative thought, of brilliant thought. When they see it from other people, when they see it from themselves, when they bring that into the test, you're going to find that they are going to find, and you're going to find, that they are able to answer questions correctly that you have not taught them how to do. And like, going into the test with that kind of confidence is so powerful, and it's real. It's not soft soap. It's not, it's not sort of empty positive thinking. Okay. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because I want to talk explicitly about what this has to do with teaching for equity and inclusion. So what I want to talk about is that when you try something like this in your classroom for the first time, and I don't just mean test talks, I mean teaching for conceptual understanding, I mean expecting students to share their ideas, other kinds of instructional routines like dot talks, number talks, fraction talks. This is a routine I created, and I call it test talk because it borrows very heavily from those other routines, in the sense that there's think time and then there's share time, and that we have a group discussion. When you do all that, you may find resistance from your students, because that kind of math classroom, it goes against what many of us have been taught about math learning, and especially about math test taking. because we've been taught, I know I was taught, and I know a lot of my students were taught, there's only one way to do it. We need to follow the steps that we've been shown. And we may have even been taught not to use our own reasoning and not to ask questions. I know that I think my worst experience in high school math was a teacher who told us not to think. He was trying to teach us a procedure. He wanted it to be automatic. He had given us the steps, and he wanted us to practice the steps over and over again until we could do them without thinking, until they became automatic. And I remember him saying, he's walking down the aisle between the desks, and he said, "Don't think. Keep your pencil moving. Keep doing the steps." And it didn't, like, I was completely lost. I didn't understand what I was doing, but also, like, I think, like, what's the point of learning math? I want students to be thinkers. And I know that students have been taught there is only one way to do it. It's the classroom way. And they shouldn't bring their own reasoning. It's cheating. It's cheating to think of it their own way. I've heard students say that. So I want us just to think for a minute, like, how did we get here? How did we get to the place where these are the expectations that we have of math class? And I want to be clear that our traditional ways of teaching, our traditional education system evolved in a system that's guided by dominant culture, which is tied to white, middle class, heteronormative norms. Those systems, those dominant culture systems, are where this came from, and we're part of it, and we've likely internalized it, whether we agree with this or not. So I want to share with you a resource that I'm going to encourage you to check out later, which is well, the website is what I suggest you go to, which is whitesupremacyculture.info. It's not a white supremacist website. I want to be really clear about that. It's a website about dominant culture and the toxic characteristics of dominant culture and how they inform our lives. And these are, so this graphic comes from Dismantling Racism, a workshop for social change groups. And these are some of the characteristics, the things that we inherit from dominant culture and that find their way into our classrooms. And specifically, the one that I want to look at today, or to highlight today, is the belief in one right way. So just to say that this is something that, like, this is a norm in math education, and we didn't choose it, and our students didn't choose it, but it's something that has landed on all of us. And it runs really strongly through traditional ways of teaching and learning math, and it's reinforced by test-taking culture and test preparation culture. Again, think about those test prep books, and that they show you the way to solve it. And if you start to look at this, and your students start to look at this and go, well, that's not how I would solve it, then you're already pushing back against that toxic belief in one right way. When any of us hold this belief, especially when our students hold this belief that there's only one way to do it, that there's one right way, that the teacher knows it, that it's in the book, and that I have to learn it, I have to memorize it, that gets in the way of students growing their capacity for creative and flexible thinking. And it reinforces that really damaging idea that their job is to listen, remember, and reproduce, and not to think, not to be thinkers. So I bring this up because I want to be explicit that when we open up our approach to preparing for the test, we're doing more than doing something that's going to help students get better scores. We're really talking about changing the culture of math class, changing the way our students relate to math, and the way they see themselves as thinkers, as people with good brains. So I'm gonna stop for a minute and give you a chance to see if there's any. And I see Andrew has a comment in the chat, but if you have any reaction to this, or you want to unmute and share something, please feel free. And I'm looking at Andrew's comment, Andrew says, coming to the test with the presupposition, I can interrogate this test, is a power dynamic they may not be used to. But especially in a test-taking situation, power dynamics are very Nietzschean. You have the power that you take, and you lack the power that you see. Very profound. It's a powerful message of social equity that there's a moral necessity to taking the power that will oppose the students if they don't assimilate it. So thank you for that, Andrew. Well, I said I had not considered the connection between multiple approaches to a problem and equity in this way before, but it's very clear. Thank you. Yeah. Reminds me of growth mindset. I assure students that making mistakes grows their brains. It's a good thing. Yeah, this is definitely, thank you for bringing up growth mindset, Becky. It's definitely connected to this. And also connected to the idea of independent versus dependent learners. So, we cannot give students the capacity for flexible and creative thinking. We can only create the environment in which they can develop that, and then we can nurture it, we can support it. But we have to trust our students. We have to give them chances to struggle, and we have to value and honor their voices and their ideas, and all of that stuff can happen in the context of preparing for the GED, which does kind of reinforce some of these toxic ideas, these standardized tests. I mean, we do not have standardized students. We are not standardized humans. So I have a question. Is my blog on the GED? So I'll say a little bit about the blog, and there's a link to it. I'll show you where you can get to it, but it's about standardized tests. So I write the questions myself, and a lot of them are questions that are similar to what you would see on the GED or the HiSET or the TABE. All kinds of standardized tests that your students might encounter. So it's not specific to the GED, but it is about standardized testing. So, and I'll leave this open. Please, if you have more thoughts, please continue to share them. But I will take us sort of to some wrapping up. Oh, I see a couple questions. Would you say this approach is especially effective on non-calculator items? It's an interesting question, Becky. My feeling is that it's effective whether it's a calculator item or not. I mean, calculator is a tool. One of our standards for mathematical practice is to use appropriate tools strategically, and students should be empowered to use the calculator strategically. But the level of critical thinking and problem solving that you find is the same across calculator and non-calculator items. So I would say this could work for either. Barbara says, I'm 83 and was taught as a child that there was more than one way to solve a problem, that the thought process was important. Thank you for that, Barbara. Yeah, I mean, it's not, these are not new ideas that that thinking is important and that there's more than one way. They're just ideas that the dominant culture suppresses, and so that we need to work hard to elevate these ideas. So what I want to do is I want to just quickly now sort of review what the purpose is of a test talk. I saved this to the end because I hope that these things will all make sense to you now, having seen it. So the purposes of a test talk are to help students apply and extend their learning in the context of standardized test questions. It can they can be used to solidify learning and act as formative assessment if you choose a question that's related to the work you've been doing. So I said, don't choose something you've taught your students how to do, but you might choose something that might just bring them, like, stretch their understanding. Like if you've been working on area of rectangles, you might give them something with area of triangles, even though you haven't done that yet. And that can be a launching pad even for the next lesson or the next activity. To empower students to think flexibly and creatively in test situations. To build students' capacity to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them, which is our #1 standard for mathematical practice. And then just to be super clear again, that the purpose of a test talk is not to teach students how to approach specific test questions or specific question types. If that's something you want to spend class time on, you're welcome to do it, but that's not what this is about. So also just to realize that's a hefty list of goals, but I just want you to think of them more as guidelines, sort of like essential questions, things to keep in mind as you are thinking about using this routine. So I'm going to give you some next steps. And Amy, if you want to share the link that I gave you. So Amy's going to drop a link in the chat to where you can access the packet. So I'm going to suggest that you read the introduction to the packet, which goes through a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, and hopefully will help you connect to the ideas that resonated with you. And also you can look specifically, or a good starting point is to look specifically at questions 12 and 19, which are the 2 questions that we looked at today. And let me see if I can, I just want to show you quickly. So this is the website that link will take you to. So this is a website from Sabes here in Massachusetts, which is the organization that I work for. And so here is a PDF version of the packet that I think would be probably the most valuable. There's also a Word version if you want to use that to download and then you can tweak stuff and print it and stuff. But the formatting is going to be better in the PDF. And then there's also this link, which is the link to our Adult Numeracy Center blog. And so I'll just show you. This is the most recent Will This Be on the Test, January 2025. If you scroll down in the blog, you will find, you'll find one for every month except for July and August, which I take off. So you can look and see lots more test questions. And also there are other members of the team and also myself have written blogs, and I encourage you to check these out as well, because there's lots of really cool, really useful stuff from the Sabes team. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to pull the slideshow back up, and I'm going to share my contact information here. So this is me. Here's my email address at the bottom if you want to reach out to me directly. I will say that I'm always looking for questions to write blog posts about. So if you're looking through and you can't find something that you're looking for, you can send me a question or ask me if I would write one about this. And yeah, and we have a couple minutes. So if there are questions or comments, Joan, were you raising your hand? I thought I saw you raising your hand. No? Okay. No. All right. Well, anyway, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to unmute or put them in the chat.
Thank you so much, Erin. This was awesome. I was listening as I was doing some other stuff too, but math has always been such a difficult subject for myself. So it's always interesting to hear perspective from someone who teaches math. But thank you for all the information. Everybody should have the link to access the packet. I will be sure to also include that in any information that is shared with you after the GED day event ends. So if you don't get it, don't worry about it. You will have access to it. But if you want to right now, at least grab that link and bookmark it. That would be a great idea. Do we have any questions? We have a few more minutes remaining. If there are any questions that anybody'd like to ask at this point.
Don't have the link. If you scroll up, Amy posted it, but
I'll
can.
repost it again.
Nope,
Yeah,
she'll
I'll
repost
post it
Great.
lower. It ends up moving up as everybody
Yeah,
types in.
Yeah,
So
there it is.
there it is for you.